The exact second my 8-year-old boy got up at his own birthday party, locked eyes with his stepdad, and said what he said, I saw the color completely drain out of a grown man's face. My ex-wife's champagne glass slipped right out of her hand, like her fingers just gave up on holding it. It hit the concrete patio and shattered, tiny pieces scattering across the ground like a bunch of startled bugs darting away. All 25 people there went dead quiet. And I'm talking about that deep kind of quiet where you can actually hear birds chirping in the neighbor's oak tree. The kind of silence where a car driving 3 streets away sounds like it's rolling straight through your living room. Meanwhile, I was just standing there behind the birthday cake, holding a knife I was about to use for the first slice, when it hit me that my son had been hiding something for over a year. Something he'd been writing down in a notebook this whole time. Something big enough to reveal every lie my ex-wife had spent the last 3 years building up. My name's Marcus Ellison. I'm 38 years old, and I make my living as a mechanic. I run a small auto repair shop in Dayton, Ohio called Reese's Garage. It's nothing fancy, nothing that turns heads, just a plain concrete building with 3 service bays, a little waiting room where the coffee's way too strong, and an old faded sign my dad put up about 30 years ago. I took over the place after he passed, and I've been keeping it going ever since. That's something my ex-wife never really understood. To her, that shop was proof of everything I wasn't. To me, it was everything my dad ever gave me. It was a legacy, a skill I could rely on, and an honest way to take care of my family with my own 2 hands. But according to Hannah, that just didn't cut it. In her eyes, I was a didn't meet expectations. Just some guy who hasn't grown much since school. A man who'd might not achieve more than oil-stained hands and a basic 3-bedroom house on a quiet street. That's what she told me when she walked out. That's what she told her lawyer during the divorce. And from what I later realized, that's what she'd been telling our son, too. But here's the thing about kids. They're a lot smarter than people give them credit for. They pay attention. They listen closely. And, most importantly, they remember everything. And sometimes, when you least expect it, they stand up in front of a whole backyard full of people and say the truth everyone else has been too polite, or too afraid, to say out loud. That's exactly what Oliver did on his 8th birthday. Let me walk you through it so you can really see how it all went down. It was a Saturday afternoon in late June, one of those perfect Midwestern summer days where the sky is so bright blue it almost hurts your eyes. I'd been getting ready for this party for about 3 months. Picked up extra weekend jobs just to save enough money. Stayed up late the night before baking a dinosaur cake shaped like a T-Rex because Oliver's been crazy about dinosaurs since he was 4. I must have watched at least 12 tutorial videos trying to get that thing right. 12. I'm a mechanic, not a baker, but I wanted it to come out perfect for him. The backyard looked just right when everything was set up. Dinosaur banners hung along the fence. There was a folding table with a green tablecloth covered in plates that had little velociraptors printed on them. I had a cooler packed with juice boxes and sodas. Burgers and hot dogs were sizzling on the grill I'd scrubbed clean at 5 that morning. My mom showed up, my brother Mason came by, and there were neighbors, kids from Oliver's class, and parents I recognized from school pickup. It was supposed to be a good day, a normal kind of day, the kind where your kid feels loved, celebrated, and happy. Then my ex-wife walked in, with her new husband. I should probably tell you about Caleb Morgan so you understand the kind of guy he is. He's a vice president at some regional bank, about 45 years old, the type who shows up to a backyard barbecue wearing cufflinks like he's headed to a board meeting. The kind of guy who somehow works his job title into conversation within the first half-minute of meeting you. He drives this black luxury SUV that costs more than I make in a year, and he parks it right out front of my house like he's staking a claim. Hannah married him a year and a half ago. Truth is, she met him while we were still together, but that's a whole different story. What matters here is that she brought him to my son's birthday party, my house, my weekend. And, less than an hour after showing up, she stood in front of everybody I knew and announced that Brantley was Oliver's new dad now. She said Oliver finally had a real role model in his life, and that his real father, meaning me, was just some struggling who tried hard but would never be able to give him what he truly deserved. She said all of that out loud, right there in front of my mom, my brother, my neighbors, my kids' friends, and their parents. I didn't say a single word back. I just forced a smile, set the cake down, and kept on getting things ready like nothing happened. Some folks probably thought I was weak in that moment. Maybe they figured I was broken. Maybe they even felt sorry for me. But I wasn't weak. I was just waiting. Not because I had some grand plan. Not because I saw any of this coming. I was doing what I always do, showing up, keeping my head down, and putting my son first. What I didn't know was that Oliver had a plan of his own. I had no clue my quiet, thoughtful 8-year-old had been keeping a journal for over a year, writing down memories, moments, everything he'd seen and heard. So when he stood up by that cake table, opened up that worn-out spiral notebook, and started reading out loud, something hit me in a way I'll never forget. I realized I hadn't been fighting this battle by myself. Not once. My boy had been right there beside me the whole time, watching, remembering, waiting for the moment to speak. And when he finally did, he dropped a grown man to his knees and sent my ex-wife running straight to her car. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me take you back to that morning, because you need to understand how everything built up to that moment. You need to see what the day felt like before it all blew up. You need to know what it's like to be called a struggling in front of everyone you care about, to smile through it, and then watch your kid stand up and defend you when you didn't even realize he'd been paying attention. That morning, I was up at 5 o'clock on the day of Oliver's party. Not because an alarm woke me up, but because I couldn't sleep at all. Truth is, I'd been lying there since 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and going over my checklist again and again in my head. Burgers, hot dogs, buns, condiments, juice boxes, paper plates, napkins, the banner I ordered online 3 weeks back, and the cake I still needed to frost. When you only get to see your son every other weekend and one night during the week, you start realizing real fast that every single minute matters. You figure out that a birthday party isn't just some simple celebration. It turns into something bigger than that. It becomes a statement, proof of who you are to your kid, a chance to show him that even if you're not around every day, you're still his dad, that you still care about him more than anything, that you're still doing your best, no matter what. So I dragged myself out of bed, started a pot of coffee, and got right to work. The divorce was finalized 3 years ago, but honestly, it still feels as fresh as if it happened yesterday. Hannah and I had been together since high school, got married at 22, and didn't have Oliver until we were both 30. For a while there, I really believed we were happy. I thought the life I was putting together was enough for both of us. Turns out it wasn't. Hannah always wanted more out of life. More money, more status, more of everything, I guess. She started making little comments here and there about the shop, about how I'd come home smelling like motor oil, about how her friends' husbands wore suits to work while I showed up in coveralls every day. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed. Then, after a while, I started wondering if maybe she had a point. Maybe I wasn't pushing hard enough. Maybe I should have sold the shop and gone after some corporate job somewhere. But that shop meant more to me than just a paycheck. It was my dad's legacy. He built that place from nothing. Everything I know, I learned in that garage with him. And when he passed away, I made myself a promise that I'd keep it going no matter what. Walking away from it just wasn't an option for me. Apparently, for Hannah, walking away was a whole lot easier. I found out about Brantley about 6 months before she even asked for the divorce. It was just a text message on her phone she forgot to delete. When I confronted her about it, she didn't even try to deny anything. She just looked at me in a way I'll never forget, like I was some stranger she used to know a long time ago but couldn't quite place anymore. The divorce that followed was rough, worse than I ever imagined. Brantley covered the cost of her lawyers, and they were good ones too. the kind I could never afford. They made me out to be this unstable guy who worked too much and couldn't provide consistent income. They brought up every late night I spent at the shop, every emergency repair I took on during weekends, every dinner I missed because someone needed their car fixed before Monday morning. I tried to fight it, but the truth is, I didn't really stand a chance. I had a lawyer, sure, but he was fresh out of law school and completely overwhelmed by the whole case. By the time everything was said and done, Hannah ended up with primary custody. All I got was every other weekend and Wednesday evenings, 14 days out of a month. That's what the court decided I was worth as a father. 14 days. So I made really sure every one of those days counted. Wednesday nights became something special to me. I'd pick Oliver up from school at 3:30, and we'd head over to this little diner on the edge of town called Margie's. We always sat in the same booth and ordered the same thing, 2 chocolate milkshakes and a basket of fries to share. After that, we'd go back to my place and work on whatever project we had going at the time. For the last 4 months, that project had been a go-kart. I found it at a yard sale back in February. It was in rough shape, rusted frame, flat tires, and an engine that hadn't run in years. The guy selling it wanted $50 for it. I talked him down to 30. When Oliver saw it sitting in the back of my truck, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Dad, what is that?" he asked me. "That right there," I told him, "is our summer project, buddy. We're going to get it running." From that point on, every Wednesday we worked on it together. I showed him how to clean out a carburetor, how to check spark plugs, and how to patch up a tire. He'd hand me tools like a little assistant in surgery, asking questions nonstop the whole time. Why does the engine need oil? What makes the wheels turn? How fast is it going to go when we finish it? I answered every single one of those questions. I showed him everything I could. Not because I needed him to grow up and be a mechanic like me, but because I wanted him to understand something important. That building, something with your own hands, matters. That fixing things has value. That his granddad did this kind of work, and I do it too. And maybe one day he'll pass it on to his own kid. By the time his birthday came around, that go-kart was finally finished. The night before, after Oliver had gone back to his mom's, I stayed up putting the final touches on it. I painted it bright red, added a clean white racing stripe, tied a bow on top, and hid it away in the garage. That was going to be his big surprise. By 6:30 that morning, the backyard was all set. Tables in place, decorations up, grill cleaned and ready to go. I was standing there frosting that T-Rex cake when I heard a car pull into the driveway. My mom stepped out of her old Buick, holding a casserole dish and wearing that same floral apron she's worn to every family get-together since I was a kid. "You're up early," she said as she walked in. "Couldn't sleep," I told her. She gave me a look and nodded, like she already understood. Truth is, she probably did. She raised me and my brother on her own after my dad passed, so she knows what it's like to fight for your kids when life feels stacked against you. "Hannah called yesterday," she said, setting the dish down on the counter. "Said she's bringing Brantley." I kept my focus on the cake and just said, "I know." "You okay with that?" she asked. "It's Oliver's day," I told her. "Not mine." She stayed quiet for a second, then rested her hand on my shoulder. "Your father would be proud of you, Donnie. You know that, right?" I didn't respond. I just kept spreading frosting across that cake. About 20 minutes later, my brother Mason showed up carrying folding chairs and a cooler full of drinks. He took one look at me and shook his head. "She's gonna start something, you know that," he said. "Probably," I answered. "And you're just gonna let it happen?" I set the knife down and looked at him. "What do you want me to do, Mason?" I said. "Start a scene at my kid's birthday party? Give her exactly what she's hoping for?" He didn't have anything to say to that. Honestly, neither did I. But I did have a plan. Same one I'd been sticking to for the last 3 years. Show up, stay calm, put Oliver first. I just didn't realize how hard that plan was about to get tested. The party kicked off at noon. By 12:15, the backyard was packed with kids running around, parents talking near the cooler, and the smell of burgers filling the warm summer air. Oliver was smiling and laughing. That's what I kept focusing on. He was chasing his friends, just being a normal 8-year-old kid enjoying his birthday. Every time I looked at him, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, a mix of pride and something heavier. Pride because of the kid he was becoming, and sadness because I knew I was missing so much of it. Then, right around 12:30, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. I recognized it immediately. I'd seen that same car parked in what used to be my driveway more times than I care to count when I went to pick up Oliver. The engine shut off and the doors opened. And there they were. Hannah stepped out first. She showed up wearing a white sundress with a pair of designer sunglasses pushed up on her head like she was headed to a winery, not stepping into a backyard barbecue in suburban Ohio. She took one slow look around. My small house, the chain-link fence, the second-hand patio set, and I caught that slight tightening in her lips, that same old look of quiet disappointment I knew all too well. Brantley came around from the driver's side, busy adjusting his cufflinks like he had somewhere important to be. The guy was dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, at a kid's birthday party in the middle of June. He looked more like he was about to close a mortgage deal than grab a hot dog off the grill. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over to greet them. Not because I wanted to, but because my son was watching. "Donovan," Hannah said. "No hello, no thanks for inviting us, just my name," like she was checking something off a list. "Hannah, Brantley," I said with a nod to both of them. "Oliver's out back with his friends. Food's just about ready." Brantley glanced past me toward the house and said, "Cozy place you've got here." I let that one slide. For the next hour I kept myself busy at the grill, flipping burgers, lining up hot dogs, refilling the cooler whenever it got low. I kept my head down and my mouth shut while Hannah worked that backyard like she was campaigning for office. She went around hugging the other moms, complimenting their outfits, laughing way too loud at things that weren't even funny. And Brantley, man, that guy made sure he was part of every conversation. No matter what people were talking about, he somehow turned it back to himself. His big promotion at the bank, the vacation home they were thinking about buying in North Carolina, the private school they were considering for Oliver, because in his words, public education just doesn't provide the same opportunities. I could see my mom's face getting tighter with every word that came out of his mouth. Mason had to step away twice just to keep himself from snapping. But the part that got to me the most was watching how Brantley acted around Oliver. Every time my boy walked by, Brantley would reach out, ruffle his hair, pat his shoulder. It didn't feel real. It felt staged, like he was playing the part of a dad in some cheesy commercial. And every time it happened, Oliver would flinch. Just a little, but enough for me to notice. Around 1:30, I brought the cake out. I'd spent 4 hours working on that thing, a green T-Rex with frosting scales and little candy eyes. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot, but it was made with love. I set it down on the picnic table and started putting the candles in place. That's when Hannah decided it was her moment. She tapped a fork against her champagne glass. Actual champagne. She'd brought her own bottle because apparently the lemonade I made wasn't good enough. "Everyone, can I get your attention, please?" she called out. The whole backyard went quiet. Parents turned. Kids stopped running. I stood there behind the cake, holding a book of matches, and suddenly it felt like I was watching a car crash happen in slow motion. Hannah pulled Oliver in close to her side. Brantley stepped up on the other side and rested his hand on my son's shoulder. Oliver didn't look comfortable. He looked stuck. "I just want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate Oliver's special day," Hannah started, "and I'd like to introduce someone very important." She gestured toward Brantley. "This is my husband, Brantley, Oliver's new daddy." That hit me like a punch straight to the gut, but she wasn't finished. "We've been working so hard to give Oliver the kind of stable, successful home he deserves," she went on. A home with real opportunities and real structure. Then she paused and looked right at me. His biological father tries. He really does. Bless his heart. But now, Oliver finally has a real role model. Someone who can show him what success actually looks like. Nobody said a word. Nobody even moved. I could feel every set of eyes in that yard shifting back and forth between me and her, waiting to see what I'd do next. My mom shot up out of her chair so fast it scraped across the patio. Mason grabbed her arm to hold her back. I could see his jaw tighten, that vein in his neck starting to pulse. Me? I didn't react. I set the matches down, picked up the cake knife, looked at my son, who was staring at me with those big brown eyes like he wished he could disappear. And I smiled. "Who's ready for some birthday cake?" I said. Hannah's smile slipped for just a second. She'd been waiting for a reaction. Something loud, something ugly, something she could use later. Proof that I was exactly the unstable, angry man her lawyers had painted me to be. I didn't give her that. I walked back to the grill, flipped a burger that didn't even need flipping, just to keep my hands busy so nobody would notice they were shaking. A minute later, I felt someone small step up beside me. Oliver had slipped away from his mom and came over to stand next to me at the grill. He didn't say anything. He just reached up and handed me the spatula. I looked down at him. He looked back up at me. And in that moment, something passed between us. No words, just understanding. Something told me this wasn't over. After Hannah's little speech, the party kept going, but it wasn't the same. The whole vibe had shifted. People talked quieter. Most of the parents avoided looking at me altogether. A few gave me those small, sympathetic nods, the kind you see at funerals when folks don't know what else to do. I just kept moving, kept smiling, kept acting like I hadn't just been torn down in front of everyone I knew. But inside, it was a different story. Everything in me was screaming to fight back, to tell the truth right there in front of everyone, to let them all know that Hannah had been cheating on me for 6 months before she ever asked for a divorce, that Brantley helped bankroll lawyers I could never afford, that this man, this so-called new daddy, had never once shown up for a school play, never helped with homework, never done a really thing except throw money at problems and call it parenting. I wanted to say it all. I wanted to watch Hannah's face fall apart the same way mine did when I found those messages 3 years ago. But I didn't. Because Oliver was standing 10 feet away, watching everything. And if I lost it, if I made a scene, if I gave Hannah exactly what she wanted, my son would be the one caught in the middle of it. He'd remember that moment for the rest of his life, and I wasn't going to do that to him. Not ever. So I swallowed my pride, just like I'd been doing for the past 3 years, and kept flipping burgers. By around 2 o'clock, the crowd had started to thin out a bit. Some parents had already taken their kids home. The ones who stayed were gathered in small groups, talking about summer plans and soccer leagues like nothing had happened. Hannah had planted herself by the lemonade table, holding court like she owned the place, laughing at something one of the other moms said. Brantley was off to the side, glued to his phone, probably checking stock prices or whatever guys like him do at a kid's birthday party. I just needed a minute, one quiet minute away from all of it. So I slipped into the garage and pulled the door shut behind me. The go-kart was sitting exactly where I left it. That red paint shined under the fluorescent lights, with the white racing stripe running clean down the middle. The big, silver bow was still stuck right on the steering wheel. I ran my hand along the frame, thinking about all those Wednesday nights. Oliver, sitting on an upside-down bucket, passing me tools, asking 100 questions about how engines work, getting grease on his face and laughing like it was the best thing in the world. That, right there, that was what mattered. Not Hannah's speeches, not Brantley's money. This. The garage door creaked open behind me. I turned and saw my mom stepping in, her face soft, full of concern. She didn't say anything at first, just walked over and stood beside me looking at the go-kart. You two built this together, she asked. Every Wednesday for 4 months, I said. She nodded slowly. It's beautiful, Donnie. I didn't answer. I was too busy trying to hold myself together. Your father would be proud of you, she said quietly. Not because you're perfect, not because you've got everything figured out, but because you're here. You've always been here. That's what counts. I felt my eyes start to burn, so I blinked hard and pushed it back. I just want to be enough for him, Mom, I said. I want him to know I'm trying. She reached over and rested her hand on my arm. He knows, sweetheart. Believe me. That boy knows. I took a deep breath and straightened up. Time for cake, I said. When I walked back outside, Hannah had already started lining people up for the cake moment. She had Oliver positioned right between her and Brantley, her phone out, ready to capture what she probably thought was the perfect family photo. Brantley was suggesting they take a family portrait by the cake. My mom made a low sound in her throat that honestly sounded like a growl. I ignored all of it. I walked over to the table and started lighting the 8 candles on that T-Rex cake. One for each year of my boy's life, one for every year I'd loved him more than anything else in this world. That's when I noticed Oliver wasn't paying attention to his mom at all. He kept glancing over at me, then toward the garage, then back at me again. You could see something working behind his eyes, like a thought was forming, like he'd already made up his mind about something. Mom, can I be excused for a minute? He asked. Hannah barely looked up from her phone. Make it quick, honey. We're about to sing. Oliver slipped off into the house. I watched him go, figuring he probably just needed the bathroom or something. About 2 minutes later, he came back out. He had something tucked behind his back, a worn-out spiral notebook with a blue cover. I didn't recognize it, had no clue where it came from or what he'd been writing in it. He walked slowly back over to the cake table and took his spot in front of the candles. The flames flickered in the light afternoon breeze. Everyone gathered in, struggling, phones up, ready for the moment. Hannah was smiling wide at her camera. Brantley had that same rehearsed grin on his face. And Oliver. He just stood there, holding that notebook tight, looking at me with a look I couldn't quite figure out. But I could feel it. Something was coming. I just didn't know what. Then everybody started singing Happy Birthday. 20-something voices filling up my little backyard with that same song you hear every year. Hannah angled her phone just right so she and Brantley were in the frame with Oliver, like some perfect blended family picture she wanted the world to believe in. But Oliver wasn't smiling. He stood there completely still in front of those candles, gripping that notebook like it was the most important thing he owned. The song ended. People clapped. Hannah leaned in with that picture-perfect smile. Make a wish, sweetheart. But Oliver didn't blow out the candles. Instead, he looked up at everyone gathered around and said, Can I say something first? Hannah's smile tightened just a little. Of course, honey, but let's make it quick so we can have cake. Oliver opened the notebook. His hands shook just a bit, but his voice stayed steady. My teacher had us start something called a gratitude journal last year, he said. We're supposed to write down things we're thankful for, and memories we want to keep. I've been writing in it ever since. Hannah let out this nervous little laugh. That's sweet, baby. Maybe we can share that later. I want to share it now, Oliver said, firm in a way I'd never heard before. It's my birthday. I get to decide. The whole backyard went quiet again. Hannah opened her mouth, then closed it. She glanced at Brantley, who just shrugged like he had no idea what was going on. Truth is, neither did I. Oliver flipped to a page somewhere in the middle and started reading. September 14th. Dad taught me how to change a tire today. He said every man should know how to take care of his car and the people who ride in it. He let me use the wrench by myself. I felt really strong. My throat tightened. I remembered that day clear as anything. We spent 3 hours out in the garage together. Oliver turned the page. October 31st. Dad made my Halloween costume by hand because the store didn't have the one I wanted. I was a velociraptor. It took him 2 nights, but he said it was worth it because I was the coolest dinosaur at school. I heard a couple people in the crowd smile softly. One mom even put her hand over her chest. Hannah just stood there, frozen. Oliver kept going. December 25th. Dad gave me Grandpa's old fishing rod. He said Grandpa would have wanted me to have it. I never got to meet Grandpa, but Dad tells me stories, so now I feel like I know him. That was the best present I ever got. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My mom had tears running down her face. Mason was staring at the ground, jaw locked tight. Oliver flipped ahead a few more pages. March 8th, Dad came to my school play. Even though he had to close the shop early and lose money, he sat in the front row. He was the only parent who stood up and clapped at the end. I saw him. Then he looked up from the notebook and found me in the crowd. Our eyes met, and there I was, looking at my 8-year-old son, while he looked at me like I was his hero. Then he turned and faced Brantley. My teacher asked us to write about our role models, he said. I wrote about my dad, my real dad. Brantley's smile dropped right off his face, and Oliver didn't hesitate for a second. You got me a PlayStation last Christmas, Brantley, but you've never once sat down and played it with me. You told me we'd go fishing together, but you're always busy with work stuff. You promised Mom you'd come to my baseball game, but you didn't show up. You didn't even call. Hannah stepped forward, trying to cut it off. Oliver, honey, that's enough. No, Mom, he said, his voice shaking a little but not backing down. You said Dad was a struggling... You said it in front of everyone. His voice cracked, but he kept going anyway. But Dad shows up every single time. He never breaks his promises. He built me a go-kart with his own hands. He teaches me how to fix things. And every Wednesday he makes me chocolate milkshakes. And he never forgets. Oliver closed the notebook and pressed it tight against his chest. I don't need a new dad, he said. I already have the best one. Everything went completely still. Then Hannah's champagne glass slipped from her hand. It hit the patio and shattered, the sound echoing across the yard like a loud crack. Brantley's face turned pale, completely drained, like all the color just left him at once. He looked like a man who just had every lie he ever told dragged out into the open. He mumbled something about needing some air, then turned and walked fast toward his SUV without even glancing back. Hannah stood there frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to say something. But nothing came out. Now people weren't just watching quietly anymore. A few of the parents were looking at her with something colder than politeness. But I wasn't thinking about any of them. I walked around that table, dropped down on one knee in front of my boy, and pulled him into my arms. He buried his face into my shoulder, and I could feel his little body shaking. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered. I didn't want her saying those things about you. I held him tighter. You don't have anything to be sorry for, buddy, I told him. Nothing at all. He leaned back and looked up at me, his big brown eyes still wet with tears. Can I see the go-kart now? He asked. I let out a laugh. It came out rough and thick, but it was real. Yeah, Oliver, I said. Let's go check out that go-kart. The rest of the party didn't go anything like I thought it would. Brantley never came back. About 5 minutes after Oliver finished talking, that black SUV sped off from the curb, and that was the last we saw of him that day. Hannah stuck around for maybe 10 more minutes, trying to hold things together. She made excuses, saying Oliver was overtired, confused, but nobody was buying it. The other parents looked at her differently now. Those polite smiles? Gone. Eventually, she grabbed her purse, muttered something about needing to be somewhere, and left, without even saying goodbye to her own son. Oliver didn't seem bothered at all. He was too busy sitting in that go-kart, gripping the wheel, smiling wider than I'd seen in years. We took it for a spin around the backyard. Mason gave him a push for the first couple laps while I got the engine going. Then Oliver drove it himself, slow, careful, while the guests who stayed cheered him on. My mom stood there on the patio, her hand pressed to her chest, tears still drying on her face. One of the dads from Oliver's school came up and shook my hand. "That's a good kid you're raising," he told me. "You should be proud." I was, more than I could ever really put into words. The weeks after that felt different. Hannah called me 3 days later, furious. She accused me of putting those words in Oliver's head, of turning him against her, of filling his mind with lies. I let her go on for about 2 minutes. Then I calmly told her the truth, that I had no idea about that notebook until he pulled it out at the party. She didn't believe me. Didn't matter. I told her good night and hung up, but after that, something shifted. At first, it was small. Then it became more obvious. She stopped fighting me on schedule changes. When I asked for an extra weekend in July for my brother's wedding, she agreed without arguing. When I suggested we split the cost of school supplies instead of her buying everything and billing me, she just said, "Okay." I don't know if it was guilt or exhaustion or something else entirely. Maybe she finally understood that Oliver had made up his mind, and no amount of money or speeches could change how he felt. Whatever it was, I didn't question it. I just appreciated the peace while it lasted. About 3 months later, I heard through a mutual friend that Hannah and Brantley had split up. Turns out his business trip to Miami was actually a romantic weekend with a woman from his office. Hannah found out when pictures showed up on social media. Their divorce happened fast, and it wasn't pretty. I didn't celebrate. Didn't feel like a win. Mostly, I just felt tired, and honestly, a little sad for my son, knowing he had to deal with another mess created by adults who couldn't get their lives together. About 6 months after the party, Hannah called me again, but this time her voice was different, softer, worn down. She said she was struggling, working longer hours, dealing with bills from the divorce, feeling overwhelmed. Then she asked if I'd be willing to take primary custody of Oliver. I said yes before she even finished asking. No conditions, no speeches, no victory lap, just a simple, "I'll pick him up Friday." That was almost a year ago now. These days, Oliver lives with me full-time. He's got his own room, covered in dinosaur posters and model cars. On weekends, he's right there in the garage with me, handing me tools like he's been doing it his whole life. We still go get milkshakes at Margie's every Wednesday, even though he lives with me now and I see him every day. Some traditions just mean too much to let go of. Last month, we kicked off a brand new project together. It's an old motorcycle I picked up at an estate sale. Thing needs just about everything. New engine, new brakes, pretty much a full rebuild. Oliver got so excited when he saw it, he could barely sit still. Last Tuesday evening, we were out in the garage, both of us elbow-deep in engine parts, when Oliver looked up at me with grease smeared across his cheek and a wrench in his hand. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah, buddy." "Thanks for always being there." I had to turn my head for a second so he wouldn't catch my eyes filling up. When I faced him again, I just smiled and ruffled his hair. "That's what dads do, Oliver," I told him. "That's what dads are supposed to do." For 3 years, I walked around feeling like I'd failed. 3 long years of believing I wasn't good enough because I couldn't compete with Brantley's money or the story Hannah kept telling. 3 years wondering if my own son would grow up thinking his dad was just some struggling working on cars in a small house. But over time, I learned something that changed everything. Kids don't care about how big your house is. They don't remember what kind of car you drive or how much money you've got in the bank. What they remember is who showed up for them. They remember who kept their word. They remember who made them feel safe, loved, and important. They remember all of it. And when the moment comes, they'll show the world exactly who you really are. So if you're out there right now feeling like you're not enough, like you can't measure up, like life's stacked against you, let me tell you something simple. Show up. Keep showing up, no matter what. Be present. Keep your promises. Love your kids with everything you've got, because one day, when you least expect it, they'll stand up for you. And that moment will be worth more than anything money could ever buy. That's my story. Thanks for sticking with me and hearing it out. If it hit you in the heart or made you think of someone who needs to hear it, go ahead and hit that like button. Share it with a friend or family member who might be going through something similar. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you love.